Namaskar friends, welcome back to video 6 of week 9, where we'll talk about judicial misinterpretation of linguistic behavior in risk assessment. We'll talk about how courts read languages and how errors influence justice. Friends, it is very clear that when words are misheard, justice is misled. In this session, we'll explore a critical but often overlooked issue, that is how courts interpret language when assessing risk. Judges, prosecutors, defense lawyers, psychologists, and even investigators frequently rely on linguistic cues, consciously or unconsciously, to make decisions about danger, credibility, stability, and intent. But the language is not always what it seems. When linguistic behavior is misunderstood, risk assessments may become biased or flawed, affecting everything from bail decisions or sentencing. Today, we'll look closely at how to recognize and correct such kind of errors. Friends, risk assessment is not only behavioral, it is linguistic too. Modern judicial systems rely heavily on spoken statements, written notes, confessions, police interviews, and even therapist evaluations, including courtroom testimonies. Each of these is inherently linguistic. Courts often infer risk from tone, word choices, coherence, confidence, or emotional expression. But these cues are easily misread. A nervous witness may appear dangerous. A confident offender may appear stable. Friends, at this point, linguistic expertise becomes essential to prevent such kind of misinterpretations. Let's talk about how judges unintentionally misread linguistic cues. Friends, judges are trained in law, not linguistics. As a result, they may misinterpret linguistic behavior through intuition. For example, they may assume consistency equals to truth. They may assume emotional calm equals to stability. They may assume fluent speech equals to credibility. They may assume hesitation equals to deceit. Friends, these assumptions enter judicial reasoning quietly. Forensic linguistics provides a corrective lens, showing that human communication is far more complex. When it comes to stability illusion, we can talk about the fluent offenders appear at low risk. Some offenders speak confidently, articulately, and calmly, even when discussing harmful behavior. Courts may misread this fluency as emotional stability and low recidivism risk. On the contrary, in reality, fluent speech can mask manipulation, narcissistic traits, or rehearsed narratives. Offenders who practice their statements often smooth over contradictions. Friends, linguistic calmness must not be equated with psychological calmness. When it comes to the anxiety penalty, when the fear is mistaken for dangerousness, many individuals, especially vulnerable populations, appear tense in court. Their language may be shaky, fragmented, or overly differential. Courts sometimes interpret these as instability or risk, but anxiety does not indicate violent propensity. It may reflect trauma, unfamiliarity with legal environments, cultural respect norms, or fear of authority. A linguist explains that such behavior is socially and psychologically driven, not indicative of dangerousness. Let's explore the idea of cultural mismatch in risk interpretation. Culture shapes how people express remorse, recount events, or acknowledge. For example, in some cultures, speaking softly or indirectly indicates respect. In others, it may be misread as evasiveness. Judicial officers may wrongly assume that a culturally unfamiliar style indicates lack of remorse or heightened risk. Forensic linguistics bridges this gap by contextualizing the speaker's linguistic behavior. Friends, threatening language is often evaluated in terms of explicitness and severity. But many threats rely on implication, metaphor, humor, or frustration. Courts sometimes treat ambiguous phrases like "you will regret this," "I'm done with everyone," or "watch what happens" as high risk threats without analyzing context, tone, or discourse pattern. Linguists assesses whether such statements represent genuine intent, emotional outbursts, or cultural idiom. Let's talk about a common judicial error, that is overvaluing inconsistencies. Friends, inconsistencies do not always signal deception or risk. Trauma survivors, pressured witnesses, and neurodivergent individuals often produce fragmented or evolving narratives. Courts may treat these inconsistencies as evidence of instability or dangerousness. Forensic linguists explain how memory, stress, and cognitive overload naturally disrupt narrative structure, preventing wrongful risk elevation. Let's understand with one example. An example of a misread statement leading to a wrongful detention. In an anonymized case, a young man made a vague statement during police questioning. It was like, "I don't know what I'll do if this continues." Investigators interpreted it as a threat of violence, and risk assessment flagged him as dangerous. Linguistic analysis later showed that the phrase reflected emotional despair, not aggression. The detainee's cultural background used ambiguity as a socially appropriate way to express distress. The linguistic report played a key role in correcting the misinterpretation. Now, on the contrary, let's talk about another case example of rehearsed calmness misread as psychological stability. In another case, an offender accused of repeat violent behavior spoke with remarkable composure. His narrative was extremely coherent, emotionless, and perfectly structured. The court initially saw this as stability and low risk. But linguistic analysis detected memorized phrasing, unnatural rhythm, and avoidance of spontaneous detail, the markers of practiced deception. The linguistic profile help recalibrate the risk evaluation. Let's talk about how linguists support judicial risk assessment panels. Forensic linguists can assist by interpreting ambiguous statements, by analyzing remorse language, by differentiating threat from frustration, by distinguishing trauma from deceit, by identifying rehearsed narratives, by explaining cultural communication norms, and clarifying linguistic behaviors shaped by stress. Their expertise reduces unjustified risk elevation or underestimation, promoting the individuals. Now, when it comes to ethical duty, it is the duty to prevent linguistic misjudgment. Friends, linguists must exercise restraint. Overclaiming can distort risk decisions. Ethical linguistic reporting emphasizes probability, limitations, context, and psychological influence. The goal is not to excuse behavior, but to ensure accurate interpretation. Friends, ethical explanation prevents courts from conflating linguistic markers with dangerousness. See, I'll tell you one beautiful sentence. It is a kind of equation that can help you as a budding forensic linguist. To judge risk fairly, you must hear language fairly. Why? Because judicial risk assessment is a high stakes process. Its lives and freedoms hinge on how language is interpreted. As forensic linguists, we ensure that no one is judged unfairly because their words were misunderstood. When we are coming to an end of this video, I'm sure that you must have enjoyed this journey. Friends, in the next video, we'll explore how organized crime influences linguistic behavior within the high pressure interrogations, completing the psychological dimensions of week 9. Until I catch you in the next video, till then, stay tuned to this course. Thank you very much. Namaskar.